There are moments in reality television when the curtain slips, just enough for us to catch a glimpse of what's really going on behind the polished family portraits and scripted smiles. And for anyone who's been watching Sister Wives for more than a season, the moment Garrison Brown passed away was one of those times. A moment that cracked the glossy surface and exposed the raw, uncomfortable truth beneath. It was heartbreaking. A young man, gone far too soon. But what was even more disturbing was who didn't seem to show up emotionally. Robin Brown, who has spent season after season crying on cue, weeping over strained relationships, playing the misunderstood outsider, could barely muster a reaction. And the silence? It was loud. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss another breakdown of the stories they don't want you to see. And I want to know your thoughts on this one, because this episode, this reaction, this family fracture, it's hard to watch without feeling something. Garrison was Janelle's son, a National Guardsman, honest, bold, and one of the few in the Brown family who dared to challenge the narrative. He saw what was really happening, how Robin and Cody had slowly become the central force, while the other wives and children were pushed aside. And for that, he was alienated. He was silenced. Robin, who once cried over Meri's divorce, who broke down over COVID rules, who claimed to be devastated by family tension, had almost nothing to say when Garrison died. No real grief, no visible heartbreak, just an awkward attempt to squeeze out a tear, and a lot of talk about how hard it was for Cody. This isn't just about a lack of tears. It's about what those missing tears reveal. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the reactions we saw on screen, what was said, what wasn't, and what it tells us about the long-hidden dynamics between Robin, Cody, and the rest of the family. And I promise you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you've followed Sister Wives for any length of time, you know that Robin Brown has never held back the waterworks. From the very beginning, she's been the face of high-stakes emotion. Crying in confessional interviews, crying at family meetings, crying when the wind shifts direction. I mean, this is the same woman who cried when she talked about the spiritual beauty of being a sister wife. She cried when Meri legally divorced Cody so Robin could marry him. She cried when Christine started pulling away. She cried when her stepkids didn't include her in their emotional lives. Every season, almost like clockwork, there was a new tearful monologue. Another trembling voice, another moment where the audience was meant to see her pain. And honestly, for a long time, many people believed it. She came across as soft-spoken, always trying her best, caught in the middle. But as the seasons rolled on, and the cracks in the family got wider, something about those tears started to feel rehearsed, calculated, like the crying was less about connection and more about control. It was always about how hard it was for her. Robin rarely shed tears for the kids unless it was tied to how they made her feel. She often framed herself as the victim, even when it was Cody's own children expressing hurt or rejection. Somehow, she became the one who needed comfort, and that's what makes her silence now feel so loud. When Garrison passed away, the woman who cried about COVID protocols, who sobbed over being misunderstood, barely showed a flicker of grief. Her voice was flat, her words were vague, and her focus wasn't on Garrison. It was on Cody, on what Cody was feeling, how he broke down, how she had to help him process it. Not once did she share a memory of Garrison. Not once did she describe her own heartbreak, or even pretend to be emotionally overwhelmed the way she had been so many times before. It was jarring, because this wasn't a disagreement or a family spat. This was the death of a child, her husband's child, a boy she had helped raise, a son who had once called her stepmom. But when it mattered most, there were no tears. It's not just about what she didn't say. It's about what we know she's capable of expressing. That long history of emotional outbursts set a bar. And when tragedy struck, real tragedy, Robin didn't even come close to meeting it. That's the contradiction that's shaken so many viewers. A woman who once cried for everything didn't cry for this. Garrison Brown wasn't just another background figure in the sister wives story. He was one of the few in the family brave enough to speak truth when it wasn't easy, especially when that truth pointed straight at Cody and Robin. Garrison was strong-willed, loyal to his mother Janelle, and fiercely independent. And when the family began to fracture, he didn't just sit quietly on the sidelines. He spoke up. He asked questions. And he refused to keep pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. One of the most memorable moments came during the height of the COVID conflict. Garrison and his brother Gabriel were completely cut off from Cody for refusing to follow Robin's strict household rules. They were adults, living on their own, taking precautions, but that wasn't enough for Robin. She insisted on rigid guidelines that effectively kept Cody isolated with her and her kids. Garrison called it out. He questioned it directly. He pushed back on the idea that everything had to revolve around Robin's preferences. And for that, he was punished. You could see it in Cody's face during those episodes. Garrison wasn't just disagreeing with him. He was challenging his authority, exposing how the family's rules weren't actually about health, but control. And when Garrison voiced how unfair it was that Robin and her children got all of Cody's time and energy, while the rest of the kids were ignored, the tension exploded. Robin didn't like that. In fact, she framed Garrison's honesty as aggression. She said his words hurt her. She portrayed herself as traumatized by how some of the kids, especially Garrison, blamed her for the family's breakdown. But here's the thing, Garrison wasn't blaming her. He was telling the truth. And the truth threatened the image Robin and Cody had worked so hard to protect. So when Garrison died, fans expected, at the very least, some recognition of who he really was. A young man with a voice, a son who stood for fairness, someone who, despite the conflict, was still part of the family. But Robin didn't speak about him. She didn't acknowledge what he meant to the family or even offer a moment of personal grief. Instead, she focused on how it affected Cody. That silence, it hit different. Because if you've spent years calling someone difficult or painting them as a problem, how do you mourn them publicly without admitting you might have been wrong? Robin didn't just lose a stepson. She lost the person who saw through it all. And maybe that's why she had nothing left to say. The day the news broke about Garrison's death was one of those moments that will never leave the hearts of this family or the viewers who followed them for over a decade. It wasn't just the loss of a son, it was the emotional reckoning that forced everyone to finally confront what had been building beneath the surface for years, and how each person responded said more than words ever could. Christine, who by then had already left the family, was devastated. Her voice broke, her face crumpled. And in her confessionals, she spoke with a raw, unfiltered heartbreak. This wasn't just Janelle's son, he was family. She cried while describing how she collapsed onto the floor when she found out. Her grief was immediate and sincere. Janelle, Garrison's mother, was in complete shock. Her pain was visible in every frame. She said she drove like a maniac trying to get to him, even though he was already gone. You could hear it in her voice. She was replaying every moment, wondering if there was something she missed, some way she could have stopped it. Her pain was the pain of a mother losing her child. There was no act, no performance, just deep, unbearable loss. Even Meri, who'd long been estranged from the rest of the family, broke down crying. She couldn't even speak through her tears when she talked about Garrison. And yet, despite everything, the divorces, the betrayals, she dropped everything to be with Janelle. She brought her food. She stayed by her side. Because to her, this wasn't about old wounds. It was about love. Now, Robin. Robin's reaction, shown in stark contrast to the other women, felt cold, disconnected, almost clinical. While the others talked about Garrison, Robin talked about Cody. She said she was trying to process things and help Cody get through the shock. But she offered no personal emotion. No memories of Garrison, no sadness that you could really feel. She wasn't struggling to speak through tears. She was just talking. Even when Cody broke down, Robin stayed in that caregiver role. She was calm, too calm, as if her role in that moment wasn't grieving stepmother, but emotional handler for her husband. And while the other parents cried for Garrison, Robin focused on comforting Cody. The boy himself? Barely mentioned. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't just grief playing out on screen. It was exposure. A family's truth spilling out for all of us to see, and the silence around Garrison's name in Robin's mouth spoke louder than anything she'd ever cried about before. At some point, Sister Wives stopped being a show about a family and started becoming a show about saving face. That became crystal clear in the aftermath of Garrison's death, because what should have been a moment of raw, private sorrow slowly morphed into something that felt curated, edited, staged. When Cody and Robin spoke on camera, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like PR Robin, in her sit-downs, shifted quickly into narrative mode. The focus wasn't on Garrison's life or what he meant to her. It was on the emotional toll this had taken on Cody, and, by extension, on her. She talked about how she needed to support Cody, how hard it was for him to process. But where was the heartbreak for the boy himself? Where were the memories, the regret, the connection? And Cody. Cody, who had barely spoken to Garrison in over a year, seemed more concerned with performing a version of sadness that suited the show. There's one line that still haunts people who watched. He said, almost matter-of-factly, "I just want to put him in the ground." No reflection, no warmth, just a need to end this chapter and move on. Not honor his son, not celebrate his life, just bury it. And the more you looked at that scene, the more things didn't add up. Garrison passed away in early March. But when the cameras rolled, the grass was green. The snow was gone. The skies were clear. Flagstaff doesn't look like that in March. It was obvious this was filmed much later, when the ground looked right for TV. And that tells you everything. Because if grief is real, it doesn't wait for spring. But if you're staging grief, you wait for perfect lighting. This wasn't about mourning Garrison. It was about managing optics. Even in Cody's confessionals, you could feel it. He was trying to sound changed, remorseful. He said he needed to be different, that he thought he had more time. But where was that change before? Why did it take a tragedy to say it out loud? And why, after all the hurt, were the other kids still left out in the cold? The truth is, Cody and Robin didn't lose just a family member. They lost control over the story. And when that happened, they did what they always do. They tried to shape the moment into something safe, something clean, something viewers might forgive. But grief doesn't work that way. And audiences, they saw right through it. What came after Garrison's death didn't just expose old wounds. It cracked the entire family apart. It was the kind of rupture you can't glue back together. No matter how many seasons you film or how many times you say, "We're working on it," the damage was visible and permanent. At the funeral, it wasn't Cody and Robin who were at the center. It was the siblings. The ones Garrison had grown up with, laughed with, cried with, confided in. They were the ones who held his urn. They were the ones the cameras caught comforting each other. And they were the ones who seemed to understand exactly what had been lost. Cody didn't receive the folded flag from the National Guard. That honor went to someone else, someone closer, someone who had been there. And it wasn't just symbolic, it was a loud, unspoken message. Cody had forfeited that role long ago. There were whispers that Cody and Robin weren't even invited to that National Guard memorial, that they just showed up. Some said they caused a scene, that they tried to center themselves, that they wanted it filmed. And whether or not those claims are confirmed, what's clear is this: Cody and Robin stood apart. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. They were no longer woven into the fabric of the family. The other mothers, Christine, Janelle, even Meri, closed ranks around the kids. Janelle's children leaned on one another in a way that spoke volumes. You could see it in their eyes. The protectiveness, the grief, the understanding. They weren't waiting on Cody to step in. They knew he wouldn't. Robin looked uncomfortable, out of place. And while she stood next to Cody, she didn't stand with the family. Because this family had moved on without them. What was once a shared house with shared dreams was now a collection of people who had finally, fully seen the truth. And the audience saw it too. This wasn't just a family in grief, it was a family waking up. The unity that once held sister wives together was gone, replaced by silence, distance, and a final understanding that some bonds can't survive betrayal. And the saddest part? Garrison's passing didn't just take away a bright, honest soul. It revealed who was really there for him, and who never truly was. Garrison's death didn't just break hearts, it broke the illusion. All the polished talking points, all the show-saving speeches, all the years of crying over things that now seem so small, they crumbled in the face of real loss. Because grief has a way of revealing character. And when someone's reaction feels hollow, the silence is louder than any tears could ever be. Robin Brown, once so overwhelmed with emotion over every little family conflict, stood quiet in the one moment when emotion would have been real. And Cody, the father who once demanded loyalty above all, had to face a truth he couldn't edit: that his son died feeling rejected. And now, the rest of the family is moving on without them. So I want to ask you, what do you see when someone's grief feels more like a performance than pain? Did this moment finally show you who's been real all along? Let me know in the comments. I read every word. This is Oliva, and you're watching TLC's Sister Wife Secret. If this video hit you in the heart, make sure to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to see the truth. Thanks for being here with me today. I'll see you in the next one.